Perimenopause can last anywhere from 4 to 10 years. That's not a transition, that's a career. Your body, your brain, your bones, your muscle, your metabolism, they are reliant on these immune modulating whole body hormones. And then out of the blue, without permission, they start to erratically decline.
What are your top 3 non-negotiable strategies for future-proofing your life?
Deciding that you deserve to thrive. Deciding that you get to step into the second half of your life feeling amazing. Moving like your life depends on it. Focus on balancing your blood sugar.
Dr. Mariza Snyder
is a leading voice for midlife women with over 17 years of experience as a practitioner, author, and speaker dedicated to transforming how we navigate perimenopause.
As the host of the Energized with Dr. Mariza podcast with 13 million downloads and the upcoming author of The Perimenopause Revolution, she delivers science-backed strategies to help women thrive with energy, confidence, and resilience.
Perimenopause, I call it the reckoning, because you really have to reconcile what is happening. And you have to come to terms with the fact that things are requiring more intention.
What percent do you feel like HRT is contributing to you feeling your best compared to all of the other things that you're doing in your life?
I would say max 20%. It's the lifestyle strategies. It's sleep, it's movement, keeping inflammation down. Those are going to be major players.
Welcome to the Dr. Brighten Show, where we burn the BS in women's health to the ground. I'm your host, Dr. Jolene Brighten, and if you've ever been dismissed, told your symptoms are normal or just in your head, or been told just to deal with it, this show is for you. And if while listening to this, you decide you like this kind of content, I invite you to head over to drbrighten.com, where you'll find free guides, twice weekly podcast releases, and a ton of resources to support you on your journey. Let's dive in. What are your top 3 non-negotiable strategies for future-proofing your life?
Oh, I love this question, Jolene. Okay, so number 1 is going to be deciding that you deserve to thrive, deciding that you get to step into the second half of your life feeling amazing. That would be number 1. So I think mindset has got to be the cornerstone of everything that we do in this time in our lives, or we can just get sucked into our symptoms and into not feeling like ourselves. So that would be number 1. Number 2, I would say moving like your life depends on it. You know, many of us, I was talking to my mom actually yesterday because she's here with me. And I was saying, the average American clocks less than 4,000 steps a day. And that sedentary lifestyle drives inflammation and oxidative stress and glucose deregulation. It just isn't good for our bodies. So if we want to feel more alive, just build in movement, micro movement, whether that's squats every hour, or it's walking around the block, or it is, doing some jumping jacks. Just move your body in a meaningful way. And ideally do it outside in nature if you can. And then number 3 would be focus on balancing your blood sugar as much as possible with your food. And I would say that starts in the first thing in the morning with I would say protein, fiber, healthy fat-rich breakfast. But do your best to balance your blood sugar with what you're consuming. We want to stay away from added sugar, obviously refined carbohydrates. But I would say those are the things that I would recommend for future-proofing your health.
I love that you take this perspective of move like your life depends on it, because I wake up every day and this is my mindset, is how not to die. How not to die. When I'm I really don't want to work out, because that happens, I'm but I really don't want to die. That sucks too. When I'm I don't feel like doing the sauna, I don't want to overheat. How not to die mindset, I think is so powerful. But you brought up something that nobody is talking about. So we hear all the time, lift heavy, lift heavy, lift heavy. Non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, NEAT. Tell people about that, because I think when you look at the research, yes, we need to lift heavy. Yes, we need to do all these things, but the NEAT movement is really the key to longevity.
It is. And I think that's what we see in the Blue Zone research when we take a look. They're not in the gyms. They're not lifting heavy. They're just moving constantly. They are physically active. And so what NEAT means is it's walking further from getting to the store, parking further from the store, or walking to the store, or walking to the mailbox, or taking your bike somewhere, just bringing in movement, doing chores around your house, standing when you're folding laundry. So you can just think about whatever you're doing in in your life, whether it is folding laundry or it is, cleaning the kitchen, just be adding movement. But especially if you're sitting, because there are days where you and I are probably doing podcasts or we're in meetings.
Writing books.
Right. And I track my steps on my Whoop. I'm always looking, writing books, and hours can go by and I'll look and I have 5,000 steps and it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. And I'm like, this is not what I'm doing. I'm always clocking somewhere between 10 and 12,000. And so I will get up, even if I have to move a meeting a little bit, even if I have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I grab my shoes, I go outside and I walk for the amount of time I've got and then get back in the seat, doing the work that I need to do. But I would say that is probably the key ticket. The research is clear that the more that we're moving throughout the day, not just the 20 minutes or 30 minutes of heavy lifting or resistance training. It doesn't have to be lifting heavy. It just needs to be that you are eliciting some level of resistance in your muscles, right? I think Dr. Vonda Wright says not lifting those mamby-pamby pink weights or purple weights. But I'm a big proponent of moving as much as possible. And if this is a women listening to this, which they are, and your moms, like especially moms to young children, like be out with them. That's what I do. I'm usually out with Kingston as much as I can be.
Yeah. I do on the weekends, chalk obstacle courses where it's like hop from this, we stomp bugs, we, hop over the fire. I draw all of these things. And my kids think it's like, oh, wow, you made this whole thing for us. And I'm like, yeah, mama's not getting osteoporosis. Like, this is actually a sneaky way that I'm 2 for 1ing this. And that is something that I think is such a barrier is people are like, I have to go to the gym if I want to be healthy. I have to do all of these things. And it's like, yes, and there is all of this day-to-day activity. And I love that you highlight the NEAT activity in your book because when we look at brain health, right, that is phenomenal, where they show that in aging populations, it's those who are doing chores, who are gardening, who are, going for a walk to the grocery store. Like you said, all the things you just talked about has a significant impact on the prevention of dementia, which we know women primarily get. So I just really want to appreciate you for that because we see everybody talking about perimenopause and it's just strength training. And I'm like, where's the mobility? Where's the NEAT? Where's all of that? And you did that so well in your book. Now, your book is all about perimenopause. So I want to go back because there's a myth that perimenopause is this new phenomenon. What do you say to that?
I giggle. I laugh. I honestly, when I started my practice in 2008, most of my patients were women in perimenopause and menopause. And we weren't even recognizing it. I remember patients would come in at the time and they were being siloed to psychiatrists or they were being siloed to their cardiologist. And we were not putting together the pieces that women were going through this profound transition leading into menopause. So I'm grateful that it's having a moment, but no, women have been going through this inevitability the whole time. I do feel like the amount of stress that we're dealing with today is probably exacerbating some of these symptoms and maybe even starting us a little bit earlier than we used to. The CDC says that perimenopause starts at 47 years old. And I think a lot of that
lies for so many women. Oh my goodness.
Well, I think that's late perimenopause. I think the way that we were identifying perimenopause was that you were skipping periods at that point. Like, send me a sign, make it impossible for me to miss. Oh, you're skipping periods? Then you must be on the cusp of menopause. It was all just kind of packaged as this menopause experience where women who still had their period were being told that, oh, this is suffering. This is being a woman. Women suffer.
This is literally the story of our entire lives, right? You get periods, they're painful. You have headaches with it. You have PMS. That's just how it is. You go through childbirth. Pregnancy is hard. Having a baby is hard. Postpartum's hard. That's just the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. And we're going to talk about solutions and the stress component. But something that was interesting in your book, I think you said that the first documentation of menopause was like 350 BC. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it went that far back. But I think that it's important for women to understand that perimenopause is not a new phenomenon.
No.
It's more than just skipping periods too. Let's talk about, when does perimenopause actually start and what does it look like?
Yeah, let's start with menopause because that gives us a really great benchmark of what that is. So average menopause is usually 51 years old, but natural menopause is defined anywhere between 45 years old and 55 years old. And then perimenopause is the transition leading, so before menopause. And we know that perimenopause can last anywhere from 4 to 10 years. And I joke, I'm like, that's not a transition, that's a career, right?
Yes.
And so if natural menopause can be 45 years old, which I am, that's me right now, and we extrapolate 10 years prior to that, for some women, it can be as early as our mid to late 30s. Now, I will say that women who've come into my office, when they really begin to notice that it becomes more than just the exacerbation of the daily pain points of everyday life, is usually around 41, 42. Then that's when things start to slip. That's when women start to feel like they don't feel like themselves anymore. Usually that's that benchmark moment of early 40s. But most likely they'd been experienced some level of low progesterone or some level of perimenopausal symptoms, maybe years prior. They just didn't know. But then you step into your early 40s and you're just like, what is happening to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like myself anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting because Sarah Gottfried, who I've had on the podcast, her and I were talking, and she's like, what women need to understand is this 4 to 10 years, this is an average.
Average.
And she's like, I've been in perimenopause for 15 years. And I'm like, we have to talk about the fact that this can be much longer and that medicine isn't necessarily recognizing it. So I want to talk a little bit about, what are the myths that you think need to be debunked or just go to bed and never be spoken about again when it comes to perimenopause?
One, that it's just a moment in time, like a moment of chaos, that once women get into menopause, we're good to go, as if a low hormone state is going to set us up to win. I always say that what is happening in perimenopause, this is the window of vulnerability, but it's also the window of opportunity. But a lot of the shifts, you could not have symptoms and still be losing bone. You could still be losing muscle. You could still be becoming insulin resistant. You could still have oxidative stress and inflammation in the brain, and you may not notice. And so I want women to know that it's not like this defining moment of like, we go into menopause and we're good. Like, this is a continuum. We don't stop. I don't know where this whole, okay, we get through this chaos and we're good to go. So that's number one. I want to just dispel that myth that what we do in this transition is really going to define what happens in the second half of our life. Number two, that suffering is the path. Mind blowing to me that that's very much the narrative, that it's just midlife. We just suffer and that's okay. It's not okay. Like, women do not deserve to suffer needlessly, especially when they are holding careers, families, households, and life together. Like, that's not okay. And then the last myth I want to just dispel is that we are on this massive metabolic decline. Like, yes, body composition changes are happening. Yes, we see an increase in insulin resistance, but there's a lot that we can do to support our bodies. We just need to know that we can do it.
We're going to talk about these positive aspects, but I want to zone in on what you said, this vulnerability. You are in a stage of vulnerability. What is making women vulnerable and what should they be aware of?
Yes. What's making women vulnerable is that for 30 plus years, give or take, we had hormones that are rhythmically cycling like clockwork. Your body, your brain, your bones, your muscle, your metabolism, they are reliant on these immune modulating whole body hormones. And then out of the blue, without permission, they start to erratically decline.
Without permission. I love that. Who told you?
You don't get to do that. Right? We only have so many eggs in our ovaries. And at some point we start to run out. The ovaries know it, the brain knows it, and hormones as a result begin to erratically decline. And because these are immune system modulators, because these are regulators of whether that's bone or muscle or the brain, I think about estrogen being the master CEO of the brain, and how this is a CEO who every single day of the week for years showed up at 9 o'clock and went home at 6 p.m. That's just an example. And then all of a sudden, in perimenopause, estrogen shows up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, doesn't go home till 1 a.m. The next day, doesn't show up at all. And the brain's just like, what is happening right now? Why are we deregulating? Why am I not getting the right energy that I need? Why am I experiencing inflammation? And so that's what the window of vulnerability is that we're driving metabolic changes, we're driving changes in our body composition, we're driving changes in our immune system, our gut microbiome, but most importantly, our brain is massively reorganizing.
I always like to say that your ovaries are going into retirement. And if you've ever worked with a coworker who's going into retirement, it's just like that. You can't depend on them. They don't care. They don't care about the work. They don't care
They're
about the
checked out.
products. Yeah. And they're like going to come and go as they please. Because what you going to do? Fire them? They're already
they're
gonna go.
out. Yeah.
And
Except that they do this over 10 years.
Yeah, they do this over 10 years. You frame perimenopause as a second puberty, which I think is relatable for a lot of people. But if somebody doesn't know what that means, or they're not in perimenopause yet, what does it actually mean to go through a second puberty?
Absolutely. So let's take our first puberty. Usually it's around anywhere between, let's say, 10 years old. I know it's happening earlier, but let's say 10, 11. I was 11. I was almost 12 years old at the time. And we know that these are when hormones are coming online to our reproductive years. However, it is still an erratic roller coaster as estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, all these hormones are coming online. And I think a lot of us didn't realize that puberty is about 6 to 8 years, give or take. It is a profound hormone shift, and it is destabilizing, right? I think we remember the destabilization of all of that. At least our parents remember that for sure. But now our second puberty is a descension. So we're leaving our reproductive years and we're experiencing that same roller coaster coming out of those years, except that now we have children and now we have full-on careers. Now we have to operate at a level of executive functioning, and we have households to run. So it's a higher stakes game in this time of our lives versus the anxiety of maybe losing a boyfriend or getting a boyfriend and school grades. So it's a little bit of a different situation. And at the very least, we got some level of education when it came to our first puberty. I wouldn't say that we did an amazing job at that. I remember just being told that now that I have a period, I'm going to suffer every month for about a week. And that's just my plight as a woman.
Yeah. And you brought up the point that we have kids. There are some women who are simultaneously going through perimenopause and have a teen or a preteen going through puberty. And I think that is such a sticky place to be, right? Because there's not only all of these emotions that are riding high, but there's this, unpredictability to how you might feel, how they might feel, what happens when you're outside the house, when they're outside the house. And it's really, what we see right now. Perimenopausal women are in that sandwich generation of caretaking, usually elderly parents and children. So we're definitely going to get into the stress of all of this. But you said something in your book that I think really will hit home with a lot of women, and that is that perimenopause has honestly been the most disorienting experience of my life on every level. Can you say more about what perimenopause has been like for you?
It has been, I would say, it has felt so destabilizing. And I think that is the other part of first puberty and second puberty is that the brain is massively reorganizing. I think both phases and postpartum too, those are big neuroendocrine transitions. But for me, and I don't know if it's because I have a adverse child experience score of a 6, that I have trauma, or that I had been running on stress for years, but whatever it is, or that my mom had severe rage and mood swings and she felt completely untethered and unhinged. But that's a lot of what perimenopause has been for me is the brain related symptoms have been so intense. And as a mom who has a 4.5-year-old, he's almost 5, he'll tell you he's almost 5, who I am gentle and kind to, it is a lot of needing to take breaks, a lot of needing to go regulate myself, a lot of taking hormones, and a lot of walks outside to just feel regulated in my body. It's not, I would say that the mood changes are not as severe as they were in the beginning, but I also know that, I'm still in early perimenopause. Who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think, what you hit on is something that isn't talked about enough, right? We talk about hot flash, we talk about vaginal dryness, we talk about libido changes, we talk about skin changes, right? But the cognitive changes are not talked about enough. And they are the most distressing because you go from, for example, you're running a company, you're writing books, you're raising a toddler, and then, the brain's symptoms set in, right? So I actually experienced this when I was on Lupron. So for people listening, you get no perimenopause. You just go from like, everything is great and my hormones are awesome to I have no hormones. I'm in menopause within a matter of weeks. And that Christmas, I accidentally bought multiple gifts because I couldn't even keep track of what I had actually purchased. This is why I should just buy stuff online, check my cart, then I would know. But my son ended up opening these giant Lego sets, like 2 of them, most expensive mistake. But that is something that I'm like, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the failings that happen at work. Are they failings? I don't know, but they feel like
they
it
feel
when
like
it's
failings.
you.
Yeah.
And the financial burden of the mistakes and the financial burden that not only perimenopause has on the individual, but as a society as a whole. You had said in your book, medical expenses and lost work time cost U.S. employers $26 billion.
26
With a
billion.
B.
Yeah.
What's going on?
And that's not even, that's the money, that's the revenue. And I mean, the money matters. But I think about these women who have built these careers, who have put themselves in positions, have been in the corporate world, or even just in businesses like us, who all of a sudden wonder, am I even going to finish the book? Can I finish the book? Am I going to be able to get on a podcast again? Is my ability to pull words from thin air, is it even going to work or happen for me? Am I going to get promoted? What's going to happen in that presentation? I mean, that feeling, we're so quick to blame women and to tell women it is their fault. And I think it's important that we know that the brain-related symptoms, it's going to be the most predominant, and that it isn't your fault. You are not broken. It's just your brain is trying to recalibrate with the fact that it is losing its most critical hormones. And as a result, we see that decline in energy. We see the decline in white matter and gray matter. And that there are things that we can do about it. But yes, I would say that there was a good, 6 to 9 months where I was nervous about a presentation or being in public, like speaking on stage, because I didn't know if I was going to remember what I needed to say.
Mm-hmm. I will share that on this podcast, we've definitely had guests who are in perimenopause and they will be mid-sentence and they'll say, I completely forgot what we were talking about. Can we start over? And I'm like, absolutely. And so
it's my greatest fear.
Yeah,
it has not happened yet, but it is my greatest fear.
I have that fear as well. But I think why I bring that up is because, I mean, you've been fine. This whole podcast, I'm not saying it's you, but we edit those things out. And so people don't see that, right? And we don't show up in public and if we're struggling that way. So when you're experiencing these brain changes, it's often isolating because you think you're the only one experiencing this, because the way social media is, we edit it, we cut it, and we show up in a certain way. If we're not feeling hot in our brain, we don't want to go out with friends, right? We don't want to converse. And certainly, if your brain energy is being strained, like you're going to think different about when you speak on stages. Like for me, I have always had like rituals and guarding my energy before I take a stage. And yet I see a lot of women in perimenopause who I'm just watching them and I know what stage they're in and they're speaking less on stages. And I'm like, I know this struggle. I know what's going on here.
Yeah, no, I see it. I was actually just interviewing a dear friend of ours, a colleague who I won't say because she was a very vulnerable conversation, but it was that moment where her sleep was so bad. Her mood was so intense and she could not remember anything she thought. I mean, it's amazing to me how we can be in this profession for so long and still feel like we're experiencing early dementia.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's perimenopause and still think I'm not going to recover from this.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to have to shift how I do work. I'm going to have to shift how I'm showing up. And that breaks my heart that we don't have the level of support, that we don't feel like we have the level of support that we need to navigate this profound transition.
Mm-hmm.
And that we think that we're going to have to shift the way that we are doing our careers. And unfortunately, millions of women, because they don't have the support that they need, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. we've talked about the cognitive changes, the brain struggles, the lags, if you will. What do you think are some of the other disruptive symptoms of perimenopause that women are not warned about?
I would say the lack of stress resilience. There is nothing like heading into this phase, knowing that you could have a million tabs open and handle them, that you're a great multitasker, that you are high functioning and you can navigate. Okay, you need to order your kids' shoes at like 9 o'clock in the night because they lost them for their soccer game the next day. And you can have the presentation ready and you can make sure everything that is you're needed for lunch is the next day. And okay, you've got these podcasts that you're preparing, whatever it is, like you have this level of high functioning and you have capacity. But then all of a sudden, it's like you wake up one day and your ability to manage all of these things just flutter. They just flutter away. Or your ability to handle, I think I was reading a stat, and I say this only because I am a mom to a young child, but that an average mom with a young child gets pelleted, pummeled with about 400 to 500 questions a day. And sometimes it's multiple all at the same time. I know you have a little young one.
Is your child in school?
Yes.
Yes. I don't blame teachers. I blame admin. And I think about this all the time. It's hell for me. It's hell for every parent that I talk to. And it's hell for the teachers as well. We've got a top-down issue that is seriously about to break. I tell my husband all the time, the worst part of being a parent is school. Is like, I'm so afraid I'm going to mess it up for them all the time because I got no less than a dozen emails before school started. And then the day before school started, or the Friday before, I was told like, oh, you need to have all of these things come Monday. And I'm like, but how? It's Saturday. Like,
no, totally. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just the amount that's coming at us. And what's destabilizing about it is you were able to handle it. And then all of a sudden you're not. And then you're snapping at your family or snapping at your partner and you don't have the same capacity. There's a grieving process, I think, when we step in and we realize we're not thinking the way that we used to. We don't have the resilience the way that we used to. And we notice our mental energy isn't what it used to be. There is a reconciliation. I always call perimenopause, I call it the reckoning, because you really have to reconcile what is happening. And you have to come to terms with the fact that you have to be a little bit more intentional. You got to effort a little bit more, and not to this. I don't want women to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to over effort. I don't want you to feel that way. I just mean in the sense that things are requiring more intention. Gone are the days where you could just get so much sleep, or you could just have a stacked day and you're like, I got this. No, you have to be more protective of your energy. You have to be more protective of your time and of your mental bandwidth. But I think that's the thing that we're not talking about enough, is how we are expected to keep it all together and we are holding on by a thread.
And that morning that you talked about, I mean, it's real when you start clocking, where you're at in terms of being midlife and realizing that like you are ticking down to menopause, and then
and then postmenopause.
Postmenopause, and there's only so much time left. And I think that, not to be like, oh, doomsday about it, but it's that you start recognizing there's only so much time left. You have things you want to accomplish with this time, and yet physiologically, the body's not on board for that. That's hard. It's a hard place to be.
And the brain too. The brain's not on board. I mean, I think, again, when you are, I think every woman listening to this show, I know that they're high functioning. I know that they've got big dreams and they've got aspirations, and they are the glue that holds it all together. And when you feel like your glue is melting into the ground, you're like, how am I going to get through this? And that's where, I mean, I guess mentioned I'm 46 this week, and
happy birthday.
Thank you. And hopefully I live to 91. I'm not trying to live a long time. I want to live a quality time. That's my intention. But I'm going to wager a guess that I'm halfway through my life at this point. And I think the question that comes up, the existential question is this it? Is this all? Do I want to keep stepping into the second half of my life, doing what I'm doing, living the way that I've been living, being in the relationships that I've been in? I think this is where we take stock and we become more discerning about our boundaries. about what we're a full body yes or a full body no to, about the relationships that are just draining us or keeping us alive and helping us to thrive, that feel safe. Like this is where we that's why I call it the reckoning, is that if whatever got you here isn't what you love, like you've been tolerating, just note that this is the moment where you get to decide, like, am I willing to tolerate this moving forward? Is this a relationship I'm willing to have? I mean, there's a reason why divorce is happening. I think 45 is like the magic divorce number, because women are just like, no.
I got 6 months to 45. Someone tell my husband, no, I'm just kidding. He's literally in the other room right now, probably being like, what?
He's watching us on the screen. But no, I mean, it's, all of this, everything's up for review.
Yeah. Full body yes, full body no. That sounds like a tool that women could be leveraging to get what they want out of life, but also make sure they're moving incongruent with what their desires are, what their goals are. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I would say any decision that's coming to you, I think one of the things that we've been taught is to not trust ourselves. It's not trust our intuition, because there's so much power in that. And I think if you haven't been taught to trust yourself, now's the time. I think that the body has a great way, especially in perimenopause, of really telling us what's up. Like whether you want to deal with it or not, it is up for review. And one of the best ways that I check in is if there's something that's coming, an opportunity or, a crucial conversation, whatever it may be. And if I feel contraction, like I feel inward, like that's probably a full body no. And if you're not sure, tell that person or tell the opportunity, like, hey, can I have a day to think about it before you say yes? I don't know about you, but for a long time, I was very much a yes person. And then I was like, oh, I don't know how I signed up for this obligation. I never wanted to do. Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, so I can be more discerning. I get to decide. But if you are struggling with that, if you've always been a people pleaser, if you've always been someone who has said yes, and now you're finding yourself at a tipping point where you don't have capacity, take a moment and check in with your body, check in with your intuition. Go again, like check it against what is a full body yes or no for you. And if there's contraction versus expansion, then that's your answer.
Yeah. Dopamine gets derailed, I should say. Dopamine gets derailed. That's the phrase. In perimenopause. And I think that's what contributes to yeses as well, because you get a dopamine hit when you say yes. So I RSVP to a party. I'm like, yeah.
Now it doesn't happen anymore.
The day the party comes, I'm like, no.
Well, also you were in your follicular phase when you said yes.
So true. So true. I call it the follicular trap, because estrogen's riding high and everything's going well. And then when estrogen's like, I'm going to take a back seat, progesterone, do your thing. Progesterone's like, you stay home, no bra, sweatpants. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You brought up divorce rates highest in perimenopause. I have my theories of why I think this happens. I'd love to hear your theory.
My two theories. Number one is that we do have that moment where we say, is this it? But I think number two is that we still live in a society where women are holding it all together. They are taking on the mental load. They are taking on the emotional load, and they get to a point where they don't want to do it anymore. They're tired of it. And 70% of divorce is initiated by women. And the reason for that is that we initiate everything. We probably initiated the marriage in the first place.
Oh my God. So true. I mean, when you say that, for women listening, this is leadership. Women lead, and women lead when it comes to the home, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to so many aspects of life. That's where, when I see that, like, when people say like, oh, men, like, you should let your husband lead. And like, if that's your dynamic, that's fine. But biologically, physiologically speaking, and based on sociological studies, women lead. Women are the leaders. And it's shown that when we do lead, there's better outcomes, because we consider everyone. We don't just consider the end goal. We don't consider our selfish intentions of we just want this thing. We consider how the decision impacts everyone. But, as you bring up your theory, my theory in this is that exactly what you're saying, point two, men have been borrowing your brain. They have been exploiting you. And, that might sound like a harsh word, but when you are whether you're working or not, but you're taking care of a home is so much work, so much executive function. But there has been an exploitation of what your brain is capable of. And now it's no longer capable of all of those things. And you are going through a remodeling. You're supposed to redirect your attention. This is what biology dictates for you. It is normal. But often the male partner is like, yeah, I'm not going to give you any leeway for that. I expect you to do the same.
They didn't understand the assignment.
They did not understand the assignment, but it is that there was a relationship dynamic issue that existed that women compensated for over and over. Now they don't have their hormonal allies to compensate, and that relationship dynamic has to change. And if the male partner is not willing to do that work, then the relationship cannot continue. And I want to be very specific in those words, because sometimes people take that as like, oh, well, just because her hormones changed, like that means that like she should divorce him. No. Relationship issues existed. Hormones no longer can compensate and try to basically manage that and put up with a lot of these things. And so it's an opportunity for both partners to shift and change. But unfortunately, what we often see in the cases where women are initiating divorce is men said, I want it all to stay the same. Always, always, always. You keep going, you keep doing. And I am not. Your hormones are just an excuse. I'm not trying to hear that.
That's exactly what's going on. I mean, again, if we are going through a profound neuroendocrine transition and that protective shield, those hormones are fluttering to the wayside and we don't have capacity, yet your partner is expecting you to still operate at a capacity that you don't have. No, there's a breaking point.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity for all of us to be better communicators in our relationship, to ask for what we need, and for partners to get educated, for partners to understand what their partners, what their female partners are going through, so that they can support them, so that they can take on some of that load. We right now that dynamic shift for a lot of relationships just isn't there.
Yeah, and there's an intimacy level here that you both have to be willing to go into, because I think about just this morning, so I think I tore my meniscus yesterday. I'm supposed to be icing and elevating right now, but it hurt so bad. And I snapped at my husband and he's just like, I can't handle that you are just being so short with me. And I'm like, well, because I'm in like so much pain. And I realized like there's a vulnerability there where I have to be like, I'm vulnerable, I'm weak, I'm in pain, and yes, I also shouldn't be interacting in this way. And I think that's something where, honestly, it would be so great if like we just offered services, right? If mental health services were more accessible for couples, because you have to get vulnerable as a woman to be like, these changes are happening and I'm not as capable. And we don't want to say that ever, right? But also for men to be able to have that vulnerability in the relationship as well. And again, it's a level of intimacy that's rarely modeled. You're never going to see this in the media, and it's not taught.
No, it's not. One of the things that have happened to me in perimenopause is that my migraines have become more chronic. And if you are a migraine sufferer, if you ever had a really bad headache, you know that, I mean, it's to a point where it feels like someone completely scrambles my brain.
Yeah.
Like my ability to function in terms of any level of executive functioning, like I'm always just grateful that I can fold laundry. I'm always just grateful that I can maybe go to the grocery store. Like there are some things I can do.
Yeah.
But in terms of particularly being the level of parent that I want to be to my beautiful preschooler, I don't always have capacity when I'm in that level of pain, even with medication. And so I'll let my husband, Alex, know immediately when I have a migraine, because I'm usually the one doing the morning routine. And I wake up with migraines, like I know immediately at 6 a.m. that I have one. And usually Alex will sleep in because he stayed up late, which is a whole nother conversation for another day. But I will go into the room because Alex co-sleeps with Kingston, and I will say, hey, I have a migraine. It's a migraine day. I need you to step up. I need you to get up with me and help our son get him ready for school. And so, it's amazing how the level of communication that needs to exist when you're in pain or when you are not fully at your capacity. And that can be very uncomfortable. But for me, I think as a mom might come through almost every decision, like you talked about how every decision we're making is about the collective. And so when I'm making decisions in the morning and I I am in severe chronic pain, I'm running through my son. And so I'm willing to have the more vulnerable conversation with my husband if it means that the quality of my son's life is better because I had the conversation.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. You know, you have brought up stress multiple times. I don't think that this is talked about. I feel like perimenopause, like right now, it's just like strength training, eat your protein, take your hormones. And I'm like, there's this huge conversation we're not having, that you did this in your book. You have an entire pillar, which is cultivate more peace, calm, and emotional well-being. Okay, so this is absolutely a make or break you moment, I think, in life when it comes to perimenopause and stress. Can you explain what is going on for people? Because I think everything we've been talking about, right? There's stressors, but there's how we respond to stressors. Why is it in perimenopause, it's harder to respond to stressors, and stress can get the best of us?
Yeah. And I think we've been touching upon it a couple of times throughout this conversation about that protective shield, this neuroprotective shield that we have had for decades, all of a sudden begins to falter. And the hormone that we don't talk enough about, estrogen, is definitely, she always seems to be getting her heyday.
Yeah.
And she is a major player here, but progesterone is really what we begin to experience first. She is declining first, that progestation hormone in the luteal phase of our cycle. And so I always tell women that symptoms, particularly in perimenopause, at the beginning will be cyclical. Not for all of us. Some of us, unfortunately, may all just be a hodgepodge of symptoms throughout your entire cycle, but often it's usually in the luteal phase. I would say that my follicular phase, I'm still doing okay. Luteal phase, I mean, it's hit and miss.
Yeah.
Even with hormones. And I think a big part of the reason why, even with HRT, even with moving my body, even with all of the things, eating my protein out the gate in the morning, that if you are coming into perimenopause and you have a deregulated stress response system, which who doesn't at this point in life, that amount of kind of deregulation, that HPA axis, when you have the hormones that are normally keeping that stable enough, they begin to fall apart. It's like that tipping point that we just can't seem to hold it all together. And so I would say it's a combination of, you already probably are coming in to perimenopause with all the things that you are dealing with. And then the hormones that were barely kind of keeping you afloat or keeping you together begin to falter, and it all just tips.
Yeah.
I would say that is the big reason. It's the same reason why you're snapping at your partner. It's the same reason why you are noticing mood changes. You're having that sudden bout of rage. It's because we don't have the capacity to carry the amount of stress that we had been able to in the past.
Now, something else you brought up in the book is that by age 45, women are more likely than men to be overweight or obese, which is a significant risk factor for diabetes. So that is a stressor in itself, but we also know that in diabetics, that's going to affect your brain function. It's going to affect your hormones overall, certainly going to affect your longevity. Can you talk to women what is going on there? Because I feel like it does dovetail into the stress conversation as well.
Absolutely. It definitely, I wish this was operating in a silo.
Yeah.
None of this is operating in a silo. Also, when we're experiencing extra stress, we know that is going to co-elevate insulin. We know it's going to co-elevate glucose, because your body honestly thinks that you are getting chased by something, and you're not. Usually you're being chased by a deadline or a harsh conversation.
I thought you said dead lion. Deadline. Okay, I got you.
Oh man, no, a deadline or traffic or whatever it may be. Like even getting here today, I remember I mapped the traffic on, a couple days ago, but with the rain and everything, it was an extra 20 minutes. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, I got to go. Cause it just, all of a sudden we're on these deadlines. And so, stress it comes in many flavors. It can come in the metabolic changes that we're experiencing. It comes in the declining hormones, and it comes in the everyday things that we're dealing with that make life. But particularly with the metabolic changes, I think a lot of us, I think in our 20s and our 30s, we had more capacity than we did.
Yeah.
We with insulin, again, rhythmically doing its job every single month, we had more protection. We had more metabolic protection. We had more glucose and insulin protection. But as those hormones began to decline, and we have other hormones like cortisol deregulating, we start to experience those body composition changes. One of the things I was reading in the Journal of Hormones back, a 2009 article, when we look at chronic stress, we know that it co-elevates, not only it co-elevates overeating, but it co-elevates cortisol and insulin. As a result, we see those body composition changes. We see the visceral belly fat that happens. And that becomes this crazy spiral where we drive more insulin resistance and we drive more inflammation and oxidative stress. But I would say the real reason why women are seeing an increase in body weight or changes in body weight composition is due to the fact that we're not only dealing with stressors, but our hormones again are shifting. So it's all interconnected. But luckily, I don't want women to think, oh gosh, there's nothing I can do about this. There's a lot that we can do about it. And I think that first step is just giving ourselves extra grace and just knowing that we aren't broken. We just need a new level of support.
So that was going to be my next question is what can you do about this? You've got this chronic stress, you've got this metabolic dysregulation. Where would you say is a good starting point?
I love this question. And yes, isn't this the $1 million question? I would say where I would start is I would bookend my days. I would be I always say treat your sleep like it's $1 million meeting, but treat your morning like it's also $1 million meeting. Like I think one of my favorite quotes is by Louise Hay that she says, how you start your morning is how you live your day. And how you live your day is how you live your life. And if the morning is chaos, the rest of the day is going to be chaos. The life is going to be chaos. But even if you are not honoring your sleep routine. So I think bookending your morning and your evening with things that are going to help you feel alive, things that are going to feel safe, and that's going to send your brain safety signals, I think that sets you up for a major win. And then also, if the morning is what's going to set the tone for the rest of your day, what are you putting in your body? How are you fueling your future self? Like I always ask myself, particularly, I know you and I have both had brain injuries. And I will tell you that since the brain injury, my brain has been extra vulnerable. That was just 2 years ago that this happened. And ever since, one, sleep will make or break me. So even just switching time zones, if I'm not very consistent about my sleep consistency, I will feel like hot garbage the next day. So sleep is such a big part of that, but also what am I putting into my future brain? So every meal I have, everything that I consume, I always ask, is this going to fuel my future brain? And that's usually, it's going to require protein, lots of fiber, and healthy fats. Like that's what's the cornerstone of what makes up my breakfast and most meals throughout my day so that my brain is actually functioning. But as a result, I'm fueling my metabolism. I'm fueling my cells at the same time.
You have a preschooler. You're talking about protecting your mornings. What do your mornings look like as a busy mom?
Getting up way before that child gets up. That's what it looks like. And so again, that means going to bed early. So my nighttime routine starts right after Kingston goes to bed. So Kingston's asleep at 8 p.m. So that he gets his 12 hours or 11 hours of sleep, right? Everything's reverse engineered around your kids. So after Kingston's asleep, my nighttime routine starts at 8:30. That means no TV. That's no screens. Like I am really, really adamant or very disciplined about my nighttime routine. I take my supplements. I have my book. I've got my dim lighting. I've got everything set up so that I am asleep, like lights are off by 10. And so that means I wake up, like I have a sleep cue that kicks in around 9:45, 9:50, and I'm asleep by 10. And then I wake up at 6 a.m. So I have a wake cue at 6. I don't even need an alarm clock anymore. And my son doesn't usually wake up until about 7:15. So I have an hour and 15 minutes that is mine. So that is either walking outside in nature or I'm at least grounding out in my backyard and getting sunlight on my eyes. It's kind of right when the sun is rising. I am moving my body in a meaningful way, whether that's yoga. Personally, for me, it's walking. Like walking regulates my nervous system. Walking sends safety signals to my brain. Walking supports my blood sugar in the morning and it helps to wake me up. So walking is usually like, I always say, if you're stressed, walk. If you want to balance your blood sugar, walk. If you need a moment to yourself to listen to a romantic fantasy book, walk. Like that to me is the ticket to just vitality and aliveness in the second half of our lives. So that's what I do. I make sure that I've got time where I am not in mom mode to take care of me.
You brought up reading at night, and that is one of the simplest hacks to drop sleep. And we don't talk about it enough because there are studies that show that people who read before bed, their cortisol goes down. So we're always like doing all these hacks and stuff, but sometimes it can be as simple as reading to help relax you. And I love that you went through this morning routine of like, how do you get your sunshine? How do you ground? You talked about walks. I don't know why the internet is on a they're on a let's hate walks and let's hate Pilates thing right now. I'm like, firstly, with Pilates, I don't want to pee my pants. Okay. So like, yes, love Pilates. But secondly, I'm like, walking is so much more than just like, what's your calorie burn and what's your heart rate at? Like, yes, that's all important in a day, depending on your goals. But as you talked about, starting with that parasympathetic activity can totally set the tone for the day. And I love that Louise Hay quote that you brought up. And I wanna ask you, I'm gonna keep going in the stress conversation, but I thought of this. Okay, so you were talking about like the brain fog, the losing words, like feeling like frazzled. Am I going to meet the deadline? But you just wrote this book, The Perimenopause Revolution, in a year. I know what it takes to write a book. I've written
In a
books
quarter.
in a year.
I wrote it in 3 months.
Well, that's the thing, right? Okay, so if a book comes out in a year, y'all, we wrote it in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So Beyond the Pill wrote it in 3 months. Is This Normal wrote it over a 2-year period of time. I felt like that was kind of painful. My next book, writing it in 4 months. So how did you do that? How did you do that with this perimenopause brain? I know women want to know.
Oh, that's such a good question. I want to go back to even the proposal because I was a year out from my brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had been wanting to write this book so bad. It was in my heart and it was in my soul. And finally, I remember it was December 23. And I was like, I think my brain is ready. I think I can do this.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the proposal. I signed the book deal last August. This is literally like September 2nd today. And they were like, we need it by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started it at the end of September. And I will say this isn't my first rodeo. So thank goodness for that. But I had already had an outline. I was ready. And I have a great team that was able to do a lot of the other things that,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to be involved in. But I carved out probably 2 to 3 hours a day writing this book. I took a lot of walks. I did a lot of resets. And then the thing I was, a lot of people have been asking me, like, I'm sure you get this too, where people want to be an author and they're like, how do you even do it? And I was really grateful. My husband, Alex, I got to take 2 writing weekends. So I left the house. Now, mind you, I was down the street because God forbid I'd be gone away from my son very long. But I got a hotel room down the street from the house, about a 5-minute drive, because I needed my favorite coffee and matcha shops that I love. And I worked from Friday morning until Sunday afternoon. And I remember getting, I think, 5 total chapters done in those 2 writing weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I'm not sure if I would have finished the book without those writing weekends. But yeah, a lot of breaks, a lot of, having a good outline and a lot of walking. In between writing. That was how I got the book done.
I also walk. Well, you're sitting in the room with the treadmill at my desk right now, where if I get stuck, I have to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's time to review a chapter, I have to walk. But you brought up something that I think people neglect and is so important for productivity, but also mental health, and that is rituals. You were like, I have to be by my matcha shop. I have to be by these places. There's something that, as you were saying, people will ask, like, how do you do it as a writer? You got to know your rituals and like what is like home for your brain, what your brain is like. We love this. This makes us happy. It's like little bits of like joy or delight that you get in your day. And I think that people start to neglect rituals, and especially women start to think that rituals are kind of frivolous, not necessary. How important do you think rituals are to overall health?
I think they are 100% necessary if we want to get through this transition and we want to feel good. I think it's important. There's 2 mantras that I say to myself a lot, because we could go so far as to say that maybe I create problems to solve problems. And so there's something that I say, and that is nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong, because I think we're always constantly trying to solve problems. And then there's no time for feeling good. There's no time for tending to yourself. There's no time for just doing something that feels good. And then the other mantra is, it feels good to feel good. And I remember when I heard that mantra for the first time, I think it may be a Gabby Bernstein mantra. And I remember it really messed with me. I was like, wait, we get to feel good? Like, I get to feel joy? Like, I don't know about that. Like, I feel like, again, that must be frivolous. Like, I don't have time for that. I don't have bandwidth for that. But like, you can't afford not to. Like, we got to create joy. I always think about, like, what's the whole point of all of this? And it's doing the things that we love with the people that we love. doing things that fill our cup, sending the brain safety signals that everything is okay so that we're not in a constant state of vigilance and hyper awareness and, again, solving problems. And I think our bodies deserve it. Our bodies need it if we are going to have vitality into our 50s, 60s, and beyond.
What you just touched on, people who have high ACE scores, adverse childhood events, or trauma, I want you to rewind and listen to that again, because these are the people that have the hardest time thinking that they just get to feel good for feeling good's sake. These are the people that think that exactly like, and it's not like you just decided this. It is something that is part of the trauma response to think you have to earn joy, that you have to earn these things. And so that's a message I want, you know what, literally everybody rewind and listen to that again, please. I want to talk about progesterone that you brought up earlier, because without that, it's pretty easy to fly off the handle, to have rage moments, but people pleasing goes out the door. What can people do if they get triggered in the moment and they feel that, right? This is coming like the 3, 5, 7 days before your period. In perimenopause, it starts to become more unpredictable for loss of progesterone. What are your tips to not allow little life stressors, sometimes big life stressors, to completely override our nervous system?
I love this question. Number one, track your cycle. Please track your cycle. The more data that you have on yourself, the more that you know yourself, that you know your normals. If you know that on day 21, it's about to get unhinged, be ready for day 21. Like, know on day 19, communicate with people, let them know that the day 21's coming. Right? So be ready for that. Look at your schedule in advance. If you know that you're going to have more rage, you're going to have more irritability, mind you, be talking to, have the conversation around hormone replacement therapy, be thinking about that. But I will say that I'm still on HRT and day 21 rolls around for me, and some months are better than others. And I carve out more alone time. I carve out time with friends. So my recommendation is, if you know you are going to, like, work isn't going to shift, family obligations aren't going to change, what can you carve out for yourself? Can you carve out 5 minutes of alone time, 10 minutes of alone time, 20 minutes of alone time? Also, know your triggers, like you said. Is it going to be, a kind of the end of a day situation for you where you're trying to figure out dinner? Like, how can you set yourself up? On days where I have migraines, we have an amazing, organic, beautiful taco restaurant where I'm not cooking.
Yeah.
Like, on those days, I
don't need a migraine to order tacos, but yeah, you go off.
I just mean, like, how can I simplify my life?
Yeah.
How can I make it easier where there's some things I can't change, Jolene, right? I'm always going to still be the mom. There's going to be some parts of my life and my day that I'm going to have to be involved in. But how can I make it easier for me in some ways? Also, after dinner, especially if the family's watching something, I'll ask your partner, can I just go for a walk? Can I have a minute before I need to clean the kitchen or do the nighttime routine, whatever it may be? Can I just go and have 5 minutes? Like, the sun is setting right now, right at the end of dinner. And so I'm like, hey, can I go and watch the sunset for 5 minutes? And then I'll be back and I'll be more resourced. I also know when I start to spiral, I'll start to be more reactive. I'll notice that I'm talking faster. I'm problem solving too quick. So I know my triggers. And at that point, it's time for me to shift my state. And the thing that will shift your state the quickest, for some, it's going to be movement. Maybe you just need to go into another room and do some squats or do some yoga moves. Maybe you just need to be outside for a second and walk around the block. Or maybe it's breath work. Just know the thing that's going to move the needle for you, that's going to help you to shift your state. And then also, connect with somebody, whether it's a bestie on a 2-minute voice memo or it's your partner, whatever that may have connection. I always find that what makes me feel the safest is knowing that people have my back and that people understand what I'm going through. So that would be, so one, know your trigger, shift your state. It's often know your senses, and then connect with somebody that feels safe.
This community piece of health is so important, but can you talk about why community is so important for perimenopausal women, and especially those who have nervous system dysregulation? They're feeling at the mercy of stress most days.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say that we know that isolation alone, and there's no more of an isolating time than when your body is changing without permission and you have been taught to blame yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of us will think, gosh, like no one understands what I'm going through. I'm embarrassed to talk about it. I'm embarrassed to talk about the leakage. I'm embarrassed to talk about the rage. I'm embarrassed to talk about the fact that I don't feel like myself anymore. I think society expects us to just keep it all together. And so we end up going inward. We end up isolating because we think that no one understands what we're going through. And I will say, on the days that I have migraines, even though I know millions of other women are having migraines across the world, 80% of migraine sufferers are women.
Yeah.
That it's still like, it feels like no one understands what I'm going through. Like no one can understand this migraine right now. And yeah, it's so easy to want to go inward. But that's the last thing we need to do, because we know that isolation isn't protecting our brain. It's not protecting our cardiovascular health. It's not protecting our peace. Like, there's nothing peaceful about suffering in silence. And so if there's ever a time where I know we want to lean out from relationships and connection, I just want you to know that leaning in is going to be the safer move. That leaning in is going to be the thing that's going to protect you, and it's going to help your brain feel more safe inside, and you just feel more safe inside of yourself. Whether that is a animal or a friend or a family member, like, please lean into relationships in this transition, because it's what's going to get you through it. I mean, tend and befriend, the research is clear. Like, that is what we need to leverage this perimenopausal journey.
For women that are listening to this right now and they're like, well, I don't feel like I have much of a community, what are some tips to start cultivating community?
I love that. Number one is decide that friendship is worth it. Just decide, because it's going to require a little bit of effort. I think especially women in peri, a lot of our friendships were probably maybe preschool moms or sports moms, or, just like we created community because we were within the same proximity. But if you're finding that all of those relationships are dissipating because kids are off to school or you're not in that group anymore, begin thinking about who in your life can be upgraded to a friend. Maybe it's a colleague, or maybe it's someone that you've seen at the coffee shop a couple of times, and be okay with initiating. I always say that I like to, often when I'm getting a new friend, I'm often courting that friend. So be the one who follows up, be the one who sets the date, be the one who brings the special little gift, buys the matcha, creates the experience. And if you're still having a hard time with that, I mean, you can always connect to social networks, lots of communities around perimenopause and menopause, or even begin to join things that you love, whether it's a Pilates class or it's yoga class or it's a meetup group, maybe it's a hiking group. I think of my mom, she's training for another marathon right now at 64 years old. And actually there was a marathon this weekend here in Mexico City.
Yeah.
We saw it and she was so bummed. She's like, oh my God, I could have been running this marathon. But she runs not because she even loves running anymore, although I think there's some level of loving it she does love. But she does it because she loves the group. She does it because she loves the women. That's the reason why she has a running group. That's the reason why she's running another marathon. I'm like, you could have the running group and maybe not run the marathon. But yeah, I mean, just whatever hobby or thing that you love, there are people who love it too. That's another way to develop those friendships.
Yeah. So I wish I would have known your mom was coming. She loved running so much. There are running nightclubs. So everybody gets together, they run through the parks, it ends in a fiesta, and basically you're eating tacos and you're having like a disco dance party. Like, it is, people don't, like, there are people that still club here, but in Mexico City, there's a big, big focus on health. And so everything is about health, community, and how do you party and celebrate like your movement. I've actually been working up to it with my physical therapist. That's why I'm so mad I hurt my knee, because I was like, dang it, like, I wanted to go to I don't even like running. I just want to like hang
I want the
out
disco
with all
party
these
and the
people.
tacos.
It's like, yeah. Maybe I should meet them at the end. Maybe like spray myself with a water bottle.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm so sweaty, guys.
You could just be the friend that's cheering them on, right? You think about even the marathon runners. Oh my gosh, I'm definitely not telling my mom that this is happening here, because she would have wanted to go. But like, I always think, like, if I had the ultimate hack, that it would be walking or hiking with my friends after grabbing a matcha. Like, especially, or even like I'm right next to the beach, like a block away from the beach. And so we go to our favorite little organic cafe, we grab our matcha, we head down to the beach, we walk barefoot. So now I'm grounding. I am talking with my friend, usually talking about romantic fantasy books with one of my friends. I've got my matcha, and my body and my brain feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my favorite hack of all time.
Let me ask you, in writing this book, what are a few surprising, underrated tips that you learned in the research that you're like, why weren't women told about this? Like, were there any aha moments for you?
I would say, I think it's the moving all day as much as possible. The NEAT movement is so critical. I remember growing up thinking if I didn't do the big workout, then the walking wasn't what it needed to be. Like walking wasn't running, walking wasn't strength training. And so I was like, oh my gosh, if you mean the bigger, like the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of, just moving and punctuating your day with movement. So I think the big takeaway for me in the book and in the research was that we need to build our life around movement. I think that is so mission critical. Also, I had no idea how important community and friendship was, especially when you're going through this transition and everyone is telling you that something is wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like when there's nothing more, more gratifying or more relieving when your best friend also thinks she has dementia.
Yes.
You're
So
like,
true, so
oh,
true.
okay, so we all have dementia. We're good. It's because so often when you think it's just you having these symptoms, you're like, oh my gosh, it's all falling apart. And then you have your friend. She's like, oh girl, I still haven't found my keys today.
Yeah.
You're just like, I absolutely sneezed and peed a little. Like, and so you're like, oh, we're all in this together. So I think I was like, friendship is so mission critical. And I would say the other thing that I thought the research was really interested in was that being outside, being in greenscape. Like, gosh, it's so nurturing for the soul. And it feels so good. You want to regulate yourself. You want to regulate your immune system and your nervous system. Just be outside in nature. Like get into a park, get into the grass, go smell the roses. Like that is so instantaneous for shifting your state. It doesn't have to be complicated. I think that's the other thing. None of this needs to be complicated. I know there's so many complicated protocols out there and so much of what you have to do. And no, it's simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. But make time for you and be consistent.
I love all of that. And I want to say, I purposely wanted to have a conversation about perimenopause that wasn't solely focused on hormone replacement therapy or menopause hormone therapy or whatever
Called PET.
It's honestly
progesterone, estrogen, testosterone.
I want to say that I appreciate all the women putting their effort forward to try to get a better name for this. But being in the endometriosis community, watching what happens with PCOS, often as practitioners, when we want to rename things, we've kind of lost the plot of what patients really want. And what patients really want is just education and access. And so I don't know where that'll actually go because I'm like, that's a scan. That's like a lot of, and also what happens to estrogen people, which is like most of the rest of the world outside the United States using that. So I'm like, it's also, I always have a problem when people are very like, we're the US, we're the center of everything. Therefore, we control everything. Where I'm like, we have to have a global movement for women. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm not being critical. I appreciate efforts, but I also think like whenever we've seen PCOS, endometriosis, other women's health conditions that we're fighting to get attention and correct treatment and just diagnosis for. And then people start stepping in to change the name. We see that efforts get diluted and change never really happens. And you look back and you're like, wow, 10 years, that actually set us back. So we'll see. I'm open to it. But here's my...
I agree with you. And we're still failing women, or in the US or the UK, where let's just say hormone replacement therapy is a little bit more readily available. I mean, we're just failing women across the board. We're far from giving women the level of access and education that they deserve.
In Mexico, HRT is over the counter. You just go to your pharmacist and talk about it and they'll hook you up.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. Yeah. It's not cheap. It's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap.
It is something that people will ask me, like, how do you feel about, like, do you think this should be over the counter and women should have access to it? And I'm like, well, there are countries doing that. When you look at the countries that are doing that, like, there's some pretty good outcomes. Like, the only thing in Mexico you don't get over the counter is narcotics, yes, and antibiotics. Great. You don't see people abusing medication. So I think that it is something that I'm like, oral estrogen, that one's a little tricky, like, clot risk, different factors with all of that. But it is something where I'm like, if doctors are going to gatekeep gatekeep labs, gatekeep these life-saving medications, chronic disease-preventing medications, then we have to start to ask the question, should we actually put the doctor between these things anymore? I'm going to get hate for that, but
no,
all I want is healthy women.
I was just having this conversation with two dear friends about just gatekeeping labs. Just, oh my gosh, like women deserve to know what's going on with their bodies, particularly at a time where it's going to change.
Yeah.
You know, what your labs look like in your early 40s, they are not going to look the same in your late 40s. And then by the time we start to see these changes moving in an unfavorable direction, we should have been taking action at that point way before that. And so I agree with you. And what's interesting, even if, let's say, doctors are prescribing the medication, progesterone or estradiol, you're still having to figure it out. It's your body. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've changed my dosage. And then I'm also changing my dosage at the house. Like, I'm experimenting in my own right. So, I mean, women are just trying to feel better. We're just trying to get back to a place of equilibrium. I'm constantly messing with my estrogen dosage. You know, I'm cutting my patch. I'll just say it, you know, because, you know, in order like to have, even when I have a great provider, a doctor that I love and admire, I love her, but even just getting in front of her, she's slammed, you know, and so I'm constantly playing with it myself. And so I love that that's accessible here because women are just trying to figure it out. They have to take it home and figure it out, even if a doctor is guessing at a dosage.
Yeah. It's something that I think doctors are going to have to either adapt rapidly or they're going to find themselves in a really uncomfortable place in society because for too long, doctors have gate-kept labs. They have gate-kept so much and thinking
Gate-kept the knowledge that they didn't even have.
That's exactly what I was going to say is they would keep the knowledge of like what is true informed consent, all of that, because they're like, I have to get a woman to do what I want. And so no matter the cost and taking choice away from her. But when I'm seeing more, and I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but women are going on ChatGPT, putting in their symptoms. They're getting the lab report. They're going and getting the list of labs. They're going and getting their blood drawn. Then they're putting those results in there and they're proceeding and they have completely circumvented their doctor. And I want people to know that AI has great utility, but it doesn't know what to ask you. It doesn't know. It only knows what you put in. So if you have a family history of something, if you need it, it's not going to know these things like that. There's a necessary role for the doctor. But when doctors make women feel like trash every time they see them, gaslight them. I mean, nothing that I'm saying isn't well documented in the research that doctors have absolutely violated their oath in not doing harm because they absolutely have in women's medicine. And when we consider something like HRT, you know, I was gobsmacked when I saw it was Mary Claire Haver who was like, I just started prescribing HRT like a couple years ago and I was never trained in this. And I was like, I was trained in this and I was fortunate that in my women's health rotations that my attending was going through perimenopause. So she was like, y'all better know how to manage this. And I'm like, but I was just blown away to hear that in gynecology, they're not trained at all, but they're out there, like there are gynecologists who are like, I'm a hormone expert. But when you ask them, they can prescribe the pill. And that's where it stops.
That's where it stops. Yeah. I mean, it's a surgical residency. When we think about gynecology, that's really what it is. And no, none of them are getting, I think now in the US, we're up to 30% of gynecological residencies are getting a level of menopausal care, not perimenopausal care, just maybe menopausal care. And that's up from 21% about 5 years ago. But we still have such a long way to go. And I think that's the other issue. We're gatekeeping information that we don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest problem is that doctors feel it's a liability to prescribe, to give women what they need. And so I'm not surprised that women are going outside. I mean, we are a place, at least in the US and in Europe, where we're stepping into a time of not only bioobservability, but we can order our own labs. And that's what people are doing, women are doing.
Yeah.
Because it's that or they suffer.
I have to tell you, we met like 10 years ago, I think. And at the time, like, you know, I was prescribing HRT and I would get the nastiest emails, letters, like from doctors who were like, you're going to kill your patient. Like, this is like the worst thing you could be doing. And, that I gave progesterone if you didn't have a uterus. And I'm like, well, she needs sleep.
Yeah,
she has anxiety.
She has mood issues.
Like,
she's dealing with stress.
the hate that I got, and people like, I mean, it was, there were just so much. It was like a witch hunt for like any of us who were prescribing HRT. And now it's like things are starting to turn. We see more acceptance, but those people with that mindset,
They're still out there.
they have a fixed mindset. And so for anyone listening, if you meet someone like that, get a second opinion. You know, I was just actually telling my assistant today, because she was like, are you going to have surgery on your knee? And I was like, anyone who tells me I'm going to have I need surgery on my knee, I'm going to have 3 more people I meet with before I commit to something that big. So it's not that you keep seeing people because you don't like the answer that you're getting. You just need to confirm that it's right for you. And when it comes to a doctor saying, no HRT, they're working off Women's Health Initiative information, you need to confirm, is that true for you? Because, you know, sometimes your doctor, they're working off the information they have, but it's not updated information.
Yeah, I always say that it's not malice and, well, I don't know, with women's health, who knows if it's malice intent or not. But I always say it's just that they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They only know what they know. And if they're not willing to step outside of what they've learned or lack of learning, then there's that big stopgap. There's that big knowledge gap that is existing. And so if you are going to your doctor, I always say, ask them point blank, do you take care of women in perimenopause? Do you feel confident with perimenopausal care? Are you prescribing hormone replacement therapy to your patients? You know, and if they don't have an answer, or they're not sure, or they're kind of stepping around it, it's time for you to get a second opinion. Find someone that this is where they're well versed in this. They're working with women just like you, with symptoms just like you, and they've got the nuance taken care of. They know how to manage this with you. And yes, unfortunately, I know that those doctors are few and far between, but they're out there. And it's your health, your vitality, your aliveness, the second half of your life. You deserve to feel good. And you deserve support.
Yeah. And, you know, as you say all of that, there's been doctors out there for a long time. Dr. Tara, I will link to her episode. You know, I talked about how, like, you've been prescribing more than a dozen years. The hate I got, she's like, try doing it 25 years. She's like, you have no idea how, like, people would try to contact my board and say, like, I was doing bad things. And like, I'm just trying to help women live their best life. So the whole reason I actually started down this rabbit hole of HRT is that you're using HRT.
Yep.
But you're doing all of this nutrition, lifestyle, I mean, so much more. What % do you feel like HRT is contributing to you feeling your best compared to all of the other things that you're doing in your life?
I would say somewhere between 10 and 20%. 10 and 20%. I would say the number one thing that helps me is walking.
Like, I'm going to cut this episode and it's just going to be you being like, walking. I'm
like, if I haven't reiterated this 1,000 times. No, I actually asked myself this the other day as I was putting on my estrogen patch. I'm like, what percentage of my health and vitality is based on HRT? And I was like, you know, it's got to be, I would say, max 20%. Now, 20% is a lot. It's still, I think it's worthwhile. But it's the lifestyle strategies. It's sleep, it's movement, and it's alone time. It's you know, and alone time meaning I am voice memoing my besties when I'm alone. So it's not being a mom in that moment or a partner. I would say those are the things that are moving, and also obviously eating to support my body and keeping inflammation down. Those are going to be major players. But I would still say lifestyle and allowing my body to be a good, healthy host for hormones is probably the bigger lever that I'm pulling.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful for women to hear, because HRT is having its moment. It needs its moment, rightly so. But what's getting left out of the conversation is that there's this promise that HRT is your solution for everything, and not enough empowerment that women have the tools every day to step towards health. And that, I mean, 20%, not insignificant, but when you consider what the 80% is, that doesn't need a doctor's prescription. That is all the things you can be doing on your own.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason why, although HRT is a pillar in this book, in the perimenopause revolution, the other pillars are movement, are stress reduction, are sleep and circadian rhythm optimization, are balancing your blood glucose. all of those are the pillars that I really feel are moving the needle in terms of women's cellular energy. Because the biggest complaint outside of the brain-related changes, which are profound, is going to be the energy. And cellular energy, I mean, that is the quality of what you think, what you feel, and what you do. And so a lot of the pillars in this book are based around the quality of your cellular energy. And for me, that is the through line for how to feel alive in your body and how to navigate the second half of your life. HRT is a cherry on top. Now, I will say that can estrogen get you in the gym? Yes. If you have lacked the motivation, if you have been feeling flat and lacking that confidence, and you bring HRT in and it's the light bulb moment for you to actually finally move the needle in doing the lifestyle, then amen to that. And so I always joke that HRT isn't going to lift the weights for you. It's not going to walk you outside, but it could give you a little bit of that boost to actually do those actions. So it's a yes and. Like I would never... it breaks my heart when I hear that doctors and providers are gatekeeping HRT because women aren't doing the lifestyle. But what if they're not doing the lifestyle because they just feel flat? They feel depressed. They feel unmotivated. And if a little bit of testosterone or a little bit of estrogen can change the game so that they're actually doing the things to feel more alive in their body, then I am a full body yes to that.
This has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for, one, overcoming perimenopause and writing this book for everybody, and two, taking the time to sit down with us today.
Yay to overcoming perimenopause. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. If you could like, subscribe, or leave a review, it helps me so much in getting this information out to everyone who needs it. If you enjoyed this conversation, then I definitely want you to check out this.